The DNA test results came back on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered to my work email with the clinical efficiency that medical labs are known for. I almost didn't open it. I'd ordered the test as a precaution, routine genetic screening that I recommended to all my clients who were having babies. As a genetic counselor, I knew the importance of understanding hereditary risks, family medical history, potential complications. But when I clicked open that PDF and saw the results, I learned something I never wanted to know. The baby I was carrying wasn't my husband's. It was his brother's. And my sister was pregnant with the same man's child. Before we go any further, if you're invested in this story, please take a moment to hit that like button, leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe with notifications on. Your support means everything. My name is Elise Brennan, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a genetic counselor at a fertility clinic in Austin, Texas, helping couples understand their genetic risks and navigate the complex world of reproductive health. The irony of my profession isn't lost on me now. I met my husband, Connor Walsh, 4 years ago at a medical conference in Dallas. He's a cardiovascular surgeon, brilliant and driven, with the kind of focused intensity that makes him exceptional at his job. We connected over our shared passion for medicine, for helping people, for making a difference in the world. We dated for 18 months before he proposed, and we got married in a ceremony at his family's ranch outside Austin. It was beautiful. 200 guests, live band, sunset over the hill country, everything we'd dreamed of. Connor's family was old Texas money. His father, Patrick Walsh, owned a massive ranch and several successful businesses. His mother, Catherine, was involved in every charity in Austin. And his younger brother, Drew, was complicated. Drew was 31, 3 years older than Connor, and he'd always been the problem child. Where Connor was disciplined and successful, Drew was reckless and charming. He dropped out of college, traveled the world on his father's money, started and abandoned multiple business ventures. But he had charisma, the kind that made you overlook his flaws, made you want to believe he was going to get his life together eventually. I'd never been attracted to Drew. Or so I told myself. My younger sister, Ivy, was 25. She was the artistic one in our family, a photographer who lived in a small apartment in East Austin, barely scraping by financially, but fiercely independent. She'd always been the free spirit, the rebel, the one who did things her own way. She and Drew had hit it off immediately when I introduced them at our wedding. They had similar energies, creative, spontaneous, allergic to conventional responsibility. I'd been happy they were friends. It kept Drew occupied, gave Ivy someone to hang out with in Austin since she didn't know many people here. I'd been so fucking naive. Connor and I had been trying to get pregnant for 6 months when it finally happened. I'd taken the test alone in our bathroom, seen those 2 lines, and cried with joy. Connor had been thrilled when I told him, immediately starting to plan the nursery, talking about names, imagining our future. Around the same time, Ivy had called me with her own news. "Elise, I'm pregnant," she'd said, her voice strange. "I don't know what to do." "Who's the father?" I'd asked. "It's complicated. Someone I've been seeing casually. He's not interested in being involved." I'd offer to help her, to be there for her, to support whatever decision she made. She decided to keep the baby, said she wanted to do it on her own, that she didn't need a man complicating her life. I'd admired her independence, her strength. I'd had no idea we were both pregnant with the same man's children. The genetic testing I'd ordered was routine. Standard prenatal screening to check for chromosomal abnormalities, genetic disorders, any health issues that might affect the baby. The test analyzed both my DNA and the baby's DNA, which included paternal markers. When you're a genetic counselor, you understand how to read these reports. You know what the numbers mean, what the percentages indicate, what the markers reveal. The paternal markers didn't match Connor's DNA. I'd stared at those results for 10 minutes, my hands shaking, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. There had to be a mistake. Labs made errors. Samples got contaminated. This couldn't be right, but I double-checked everything. The sample was correct. The analysis was clear. The probability of paternity was 99.9% for someone else. Someone whose genetic markers I recognized. Because I'd seen these exact markers before in a different test. 3 months ago, Ivy had asked me to help her understand some genetic screening results she'd gotten. She was worried about a family history of heart disease, wanted to know if her baby was at risk. I'd reviewed her results as a favor, noting the paternal markers from the biological father. At the time, I'd just assumed they came from whoever she'd been casually seeing. But now, looking at my own results, I saw they were identical. My baby and Ivy's baby had the same father. And based on the genetic profile, I knew exactly who that father was. Drew Walsh, my husband's brother. I'd run additional tests to be absolutely certain. Cross-referenced DNA markers, checked and rechecked the analysis, looked for any possible error. There was no error. Drew had gotten both of us pregnant. I sat in my office at the fertility clinic, staring at these results, and felt my entire world collapse. My husband's brother had slept with me,
and with my sister,
at the same time, or close enough that we'd gotten pregnant within weeks of each other.
When? How? Why?
I tried to remember any time I'd been alone with Drew, any moment that could have, but my mind was blank. I had no memory of being intimate with him, no recollection of anything inappropriate happening, which meant either I was blocking it out or something else had happened. And Ivy. Sweet, independent Ivy, who'd said she was pregnant by someone she'd been casually seeing. Had she known it was Drew? Had she known we were both sleeping with the same man? The nausea hit me suddenly. I barely made it to the bathroom before I was sick. When I came back to my office, I locked the door and called the lab. I need to verify these results, I said. Run them again. There might be contamination. Ms. Brennan, the samples were processed according to protocol. The results are accurate. Run them again, anyway. Please. They agreed, though I could hear the confusion in the technician's voice. I hung up and stared at my phone, wondering who to call next.
Connor?
My husband, who thought he was going to be a father, who had no idea his brother had betrayed him in the worst possible way. Ivy? My sister, who was carrying Drew's baby, who might not even know I was in the same situation.
Drew?
The man who'd somehow managed to sleep with both his brother's wife and her sister? I couldn't call anyone.
Not yet.
Not until I understood what had happened. I pulled up my calendar, going back through the past year, looking for any gaps in my memory, any nights I couldn't account for. 6 months ago, there'd been a family gathering at the Walsh Ranch. A big party for Patrick's birthday. Connor had been on call at the hospital and had left early. I'd stayed, had a few drinks, mingled with guests. Had something happened that night? I searched my memories, trying to find anything. I remember talking to Drew by the pool. I remembered him getting me another drink. I remembered feeling tired, going inside to lie down in one of the guest rooms. And then nothing. The next thing I remembered was waking up the next morning in my own bed at home, Connor beside me, telling me he'd come back from the hospital and driven me home because I'd had too much to drink. Had I been too drunk to remember sleeping with Drew? Or had something else happened? The thought made me physically ill. I needed to talk to Ivy. I needed to know if her experience had been similar. I texted her, "Can you come over tonight? Need to talk. Important." She responded immediately, "Is everything okay? Just come over." 7 p.m. Okay. Connor was working late that night. He usually did on Tuesdays, so I'd have time to talk to Ivy privately. I went through the motions for the rest of the day. Saw clients, discussed genetic risks, explained test results, counseled couples on their reproductive options. All while my own test results sat in my desk drawer, a bomb waiting to explode my life. At 6:45 p.m., I drove home to the house Connor and I had bought in Terrytown. A beautiful craftsman with a nursery we'd just started decorating. A nursery for a baby that wasn't Connor's. Ivy arrived exactly at 7, her small baby bump just starting to show under her flowing dress. She looked concerned. "What's wrong?" she asked as soon as she walked in. "You sounded weird in your text."
"Sit down," I said.
"We need to talk." She sat on the couch, and I sat across from her in the armchair. I'd printed out both sets of test results, mine and the ones she'd shared with me months ago. "I need to ask you something," I said carefully. "And I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay." "The father of your baby. The man you said you were casually seeing. Who is he?" She looked uncomfortable. "Why does it matter?" "Ivy, please. Just tell me." She was quiet for a long moment. Then Drew. Drew Walsh. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd already known. When? I asked. When did it start? 6 months ago. At Patrick's birthday party. I was drinking, Drew was there, we ended up, I don't remember a lot of it actually. I woke up the next morning in one of the guest rooms, and he was there. My blood ran cold. You don't remember it? Not really. I remember talking to him, having drinks, feeling really tired, and then waking up with him. He said we'd hooked up, that we'd both had a lot to drink. I felt awful about it, but it had already happened, so. And after that, we kept seeing each other.
Casually.
He made me promise not to tell anyone, said his family would freak out if they knew he was involved with you guys at all, that it would be weird for everyone. So, I kept it secret. Ivy. My voice was shaking. I need to show you something. I handed her my test results. She looked confused at first, scanning the document. Then her eyes found the paternal markers section, and her face went white. This is your baby's test. Yes. But these markers, they're the same as mine. The same as. She looked up at me, horror dawning in her eyes.
No.
No, that's not possible. The baby I'm carrying isn't Connor's, I said, my voice eerily calm. It's Drew's. Just like yours. Ivy started crying.
No.
No, Elise, I swear I didn't know. I would never. If I'd known you and Drew had. I don't remember being with Drew, I said. Just like you don't. I remember that same night, the same party, the same gap in my memory. And I woke up at home the next morning with Connor, who said he'd picked me up because I was drunk. Understanding crossed her face, followed by something darker. You think he drugged us? I don't know what to think. But 2 women, both with no clear memory of consent, both ending up pregnant by the same man who told them to keep it secret? That's not casual hooking up, Ivy. That's something else. She was shaking now. Oh my God. Oh my God. What did he do to us? I didn't have an answer. We sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the horror of what we'd discovered. Does Connor know? Ivy finally asked. Not yet. I just got the results today. What are you going to do? I don't know. But I need to figure out what actually happened that night. I need to know if Drew, if he deliberately. I couldn't finish the sentence. Ivy pulled out her phone. I'm going to call him.
Right now.
I'm going to ask him what the fuck he did. Wait. But she was already dialing. Drew answered on the 3rd ring. Ivy? What's up? Ivy put him on speaker. Drew, I need you to tell me the truth about something. Okay. He sounded wary. That night at your dad's party. When we first got together. What actually happened? What do you mean? We hooked up. We were both drunk. How drunk was I? I don't know, pretty drunk. We both were. Drew, I need you to be honest. Did you give me something? Something to make me compliant? Silence on the other end. Drew? Ivy's voice was harder now. Look, you wanted it. You were flirting with me all night. Answer the fucking question. Did you drug me? More silence. Then, who have you been talking to? Ivy looked at me, her eyes wide. I took the phone. Drew, it's Elise. I heard him inhale sharply.
Elise.
Why are you? I got my genetic testing results back today. Guess what they showed? He didn't respond. The baby I'm carrying isn't Connor's. It's yours. Just like Ivy's baby is yours. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's confirmed. 99.9% probability. So I'm going to ask you the same question Ivy just asked. What did you do to us? I didn't do anything. You got 2 women pregnant, Drew. Your sister-in-law and her sister. Neither of us clearly remembers consenting to sex with you. So either you're going to tell us what actually happened, or we're going to the police. Elise, please, you can't.
What?
Did you?
Do.
He was breathing hard now, audibly panicking. Okay, look.
I didn't mean for this to happen.
I thought I was being careful. Careful about what? The pills. I put something in your drinks, just something to relax you, to make you more receptive. But I used protection, I swear I did. I don't know how you both got pregnant. I hung up. Ivy was staring at me, tears streaming down her face. He admitted it. He actually admitted it. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. He drugged us. He raped us. And we're both carrying his children. What do we do? I looked at my sister, both of us pregnant with the babies of a man who'd violated us, and I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. We tell Connor, I said. We tell your parents. We tell everyone. And then we destroy him. After I hung up on Drew, Ivy and I sat in my living room in stunned silence. The reality of what we'd just learned settled over us like a suffocating blanket. We'd both been drugged, sexually assaulted, and now we were both carrying our rapist children. What time does Connor get home? Ivy asked, her voice hollow. I checked my phone. Usually around 9 on Tuesdays. Another hour. Do you want me to stay? When you tell him. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to face this alone with my husband, to break his heart in private. But another part knew that Ivy's presence would make the story more credible, harder to dismiss. Yes, I said.
Stay.
He needs to hear it from both of us. We spent the next hour in a strange, suspended state. Ivy made tea that neither of us drank. I paced through the house, touching the furniture, the walls, the nursery door, all the pieces of a life that was about to implode. At 9:15 p.m., I heard Connor's car in the driveway. My heart started racing. How do you tell your husband that the baby he thinks is his actually belongs to his brother? That his brother drugged and raped you at his own father's birthday party? Connor walked in, still in his scrubs, looking tired but happy to be home. Then he saw Ivy sitting on the couch, and his expression shifted to concern.
Hey, Ivy.
Everything okay? His eyes moved to me. Elise? What's wrong? Sit down, I said. We need to talk to you about something. The color drained from his face. In medicine, those words usually preceded terrible news. Is it the baby? Is something wrong with the baby? Connor, please. Just sit. He sat in the armchair, and I could see his mind racing through possibilities, trying to diagnose the crisis before I'd even explained it. There's no easy way to say this, I began. My hands were shaking. I got the results back from my genetic testing today. Okay. He looked confused. What did they show? I pulled out the printed report and handed it to him. The baby isn't yours. He stared at the paper, not comprehending. What? The paternal markers don't match your DNA. The baby I'm carrying isn't yours. Connor's eyes scanned the report, his medical training allowing him to understand exactly what he was reading. I watched his face go from confusion to disbelief to dawning horror. This must be wrong, he said. Labs make mistakes. It's not wrong. I had them run it twice. The results are accurate. Then how? He looked at me and I saw the question forming. The terrible, inevitable question. Were you with someone else? I don't remember being with anyone else, I said carefully. But yes, apparently I was.
Who?
His voice was hard now, hurt creeping in around the edges. Who did you sleep with? I looked at Ivy, who nodded at me to continue. Your brother, I said. Drew.
Connor laughed.
It was a horrible sound, bitter and disbelieving. That's not funny, Elise. I'm not joking. Look at the paternal markers. You know DNA, Connor. You can see the profile. He looked back at the report, his hands starting to shake. But when?
How?
You would never. 6 months ago, I said, at your dad's birthday party. Do you remember I stayed after you left, that you came back and picked me up? You said you'd had too much to drink. I did have too much to drink. Or, at least I thought I did. But I don't remember most of that night, Connor. I remember talking to Drew by the pool. I remember him getting me another drink. And then nothing until I woke up at home the next morning. Understanding was dawning on his face, followed quickly by rage. Are you saying he drugged you? Not just me, Ivy said quietly. Connor's head snapped toward her. What? I'm pregnant too, Ivy said. Same timeline. Same father. Same missing memory of that night. Show him your results, I said to Ivy. She pulled out her phone and showed him the genetic screening she'd shared with me months ago. Connor took the phone, compared it to my report, and I watched the pieces click into place. He got you both pregnant, Connor said slowly. At the same party. By drugging you both. We called him, I said. About an hour ago. We confronted him. He admitted it. He admitted drugging you? He said he put something in our drinks to relax us and make us more receptive. His words. Connor stood up abruptly, his face going red. Where is he? Where the fuck is he right now? I don't know. I'm going to kill him. I'm actually going to kill him. He was heading for the door. I grabbed his arm. Connor, wait.
Please.
We need to think about this carefully. Think about it? He raped you. He raped your sister. He got you both pregnant. What is there to think about?
What we do next, I said.
How we handle this. Whether we go to the police, whether we tell your parents, what we do about. I gestured to my stomach. About these pregnancies. Connor stopped, his surgeon's mind reasserting itself over his rage.
Right. Okay.
We need a plan. He ran his hands through his hair, looking lost in a way I'd never seen.
Jesus Christ.
My brother. My own fucking brother. He turned to me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Elise, I'm so sorry. I left you there. I should have stayed. I should have protected you. This isn't your fault. He's my brother. My family. I brought him into your life. His voice broke. And now you're pregnant with his baby instead of mine. The anguish in those words cut through me. I went to him, wrapped my arms around him, and we stood there in our living room while he cried into my shoulder. After a few minutes, he pulled back, wiping his eyes.
Okay.
Okay, we need to think like doctors here. Clinical. What are our options? For the pregnancies? Ivy asked. For everything. The pregnancies, the criminal case, how we protect you both, how we make sure he pays for what he did. We moved to the dining table, and Connor pulled out a notepad, the same one he used for surgical planning, and started making lists. Medical first, he said. Both of you need STI testing. Full panel. We need to make sure he didn't expose you to anything else. Ivy and I nodded. I hadn't even thought about that. Then we need to decide about continuing the pregnancies. You're both about, what, for months along? 15 weeks, I said. Still within the window for termination if we want it. Do you want it? Connor asked gently. I'd been avoiding thinking about this. The baby growing inside me wasn't my husband's child. It was the product of rape. Could I carry it to term? Could I raise it? But it was also mine. Half my DNA. An innocent child who hadn't asked to be conceived this way. I don't know, I whispered. I don't either, Ivy said. Part of me wants to end this pregnancy immediately, to erase every trace of what he did. But part of me, she touched her stomach. This is still my baby. You know. Connor nodded. No wrong answer. Whatever you decide, we support. Both of you. Next, he continued, writing. Criminal charges. We have Drew's confession on speakerphone. Did either of you record it? No, I said. But we have the DNA evidence. That proves he had sexual contact with both of us. DNA proves paternity, not rape, Connor said grimly. He could claim it was consensual. 2 women, same night, both with memory gaps. Ivy said, that's not a coincidence. I know, but we need more. We need evidence of the drugging, witnesses who saw him acting suspiciously, anything that corroborates your story. Your dad's party had hundreds of guests, I said. Someone must have seen something. My mom keeps guest lists, and there were security cameras. Dad has them all over the property. If Drew was seen getting you drinks, leading you somewhere, that would help. Hope flickered. Can you get that footage? I can try. But Elise, you need to understand what going to the police means. This will become public. Everyone will know. My family, your family, our colleagues, our friends. There will be a trial if it goes to trial. You'll both have to testify about what happened about the pregnancies. It will be brutal. More brutal than staying silent. I asked. Letting him get away with this? I'm not saying you should stay silent. I'm saying you need to know what you're walking into. Ivy spoke up. What if there are others? What if we're not the only ones he's done this to? We all looked at each other as that possibility sank in. He admitted he thought he was being careful, I said slowly. Like he'd done this before. Successfully. We need to find out, Connor said, writing furiously. If there are other victims, they could strengthen the case. How do we find them? Ivy asked. We ask questions. We look at his history. Women he's dated, women who've worked with him, anyone who's been around him at parties or events. Connor looked at me. Your fertility clinic. Do you keep records of women who come in after suspected sexual assault? We do. But I can't access other counselors' files without cause. What if the cause is identifying a pattern of assault by a specific perpetrator? That might work. I need to talk to my supervisor, get approval. But yes, if we suspect Drew has been doing this to multiple women, we might be able to identify victims through their genetic testing. It felt wrong, using my professional access this way. But if Drew had been drugging and assaulting women for years, if there were other victims who deserved justice, wasn't it my responsibility to find them? We spent another hour planning. Connor made lists of people to contact, evidence to gather, steps to take. It was the only way he could process this, by treating it like a complex medical case with a protocol to follow. Around midnight, Ivy said she needed to go home. Connor insisted on driving her, not wanting her to be alone after everything. While they were gone, I sat in the quiet house and let myself fall apart. I cried for the innocence I'd lost, for the marriage that would never be the same, for the baby I was carrying who deserved better than this origin story. When Connor came back, he found me curled up on the couch, still crying. He sat down and pulled me into his arms. "We're going to get through this," he said. "I don't know how yet, but we will. Connor, the baby, is still your baby. Your DNA, your body, your choice. Whatever you decide, I'm here. But it's not yours. You wanted to be a father, and now, I still want to be a father. And if you choose to continue the pregnancy, I'll love that baby because it's yours. Not in spite of what happened, but because you're my wife and I love you." I cried harder, overwhelmed by his grace. "What about Drew?" I asked. "Your brother?" Connor's jaw tightened. "Drew stopped being my brother the moment he hurt you. He's nothing to me now. Less than nothing." The next morning, we started executing our plan. First, the STI testing. Both Ivy and I went to my clinic early, before other patients arrived. My colleague Dr. Sarah Chen ran the tests personally, asking no questions, giving us only compassionate understanding. Then, Connor called his mother. "I need you to send me the guest list from Dad's birthday party in March," he said. "And I need access to the security footage from that night." "Why?" Catherine asked. "Connor, what's going on?" "I can't explain over the phone." "But Mom, it's important. Please." She must have heard something in his voice because she agreed, without further questions. The guest list arrived within an hour. 237 names. Connor and I went through it together, highlighting anyone who might have witnessed something. The security footage was harder to access. Patrick Walsh's system required a password, and Catherine didn't have it. "I'll have to ask your father," she told Connor. "And he'll want to know why. Then tell him I need to review something that happened at the party." "Don't tell him what?" "Not yet." That afternoon, Connor met with a criminal defense attorney, or rather a prosecutor's attorney, someone who could advise us on building a case against Drew. The attorney, a woman named Lisa Hernandez, was direct. "With DNA evidence and a recorded confession, you have a strong foundation. But sexual assault cases are notoriously difficult to prosecute, especially when there's a delay between the assault and the report." "What about the pregnancies?" Connor asked. "Doesn't that prove something?" "It proves sexual contact. But he can claim it was consensual." The memory gaps complicate things. Defense attorneys will argue that alcohol-induced blackouts don't equal rape, even if substances were involved. He admitted to drugging them. On a phone call that wasn't recorded by law enforcement, obtained through what could be considered entrapment. A defense attorney might get that excluded. I felt my hope deflating. So what do? We build a case that doesn't rely on that confession. We find witnesses. We get toxicology evidence, if possible, though that's challenging 4 months after the fact. We look for other victims. We create a pattern of behavior that makes consensual sex implausible. How long does that take? Ivy asked. Months. Maybe longer. And there's no guarantee the DA will prosecute even with all that evidence. Connor and I exchanged looks. Months of investigation, of reliving the assault, of uncertainty. All while carrying pregnancies that reminded us daily of what Drew had done. "What if we go public?" I asked. "What if we tell the story ourselves, control the narrative?" "That's a calculated risk," Lisa said. "It could pressure the DA to act. It could also give Drew's attorneys ammunition to claim you're trying to manipulate public opinion." "We have to do something," Ivy said. "We can't just let him walk away from this." Lisa nodded. "Then we start with the police report. Official documentation of what happened, your accusations, the evidence you have. From there, we build the case and push for prosecution. That evening, Connor and I went to the Austin Police Department. Ivy came with us, and so did Lisa. We sat in an interview room, and I told my story to a detective named Maria Gonzalez. I explained the party, the memory gaps, the DNA test results, the phone call with Drew. Ivy told hers next. The same party, the same gaps, the same violation. Detective Gonzalez listened carefully, taking notes. Have you had any contact with the suspect since the phone call? No, I said. We've been avoiding him. Has he attempted to contact you? Multiple times. Calls, texts. We haven't responded. Do you still have those messages? I pulled out my phone and showed her. Drew had called 17 times and sent 23 texts. The messages ranged from apologies to threats to pleas for understanding. Please don't do this. I made a mistake, I'm sorry. If you go to the police, you'll destroy my family. Think about what this will do to Connor. It was consensual, you both wanted it. You're going to regret this. Detective Gonzalez photographed each message. This is good. This shows consciousness of guilt, fear of consequences. Combined with the DNA evidence and the pattern of similar circumstances between both victims, we have grounds for an investigation. What happens next? Connor asked. We'll interview the suspect. Get his statement on record. Depending on what he says, we'll determine whether to recommend charges to the DA. Will they arrest him? Ivy asked. That depends on several factors. Flight risk, danger to the community, strength of evidence. Given that he's a member of a prominent family with resources, he's unlikely to flee. But if we can establish a pattern of predatory behavior, the DA might push for arrest. We left the police station emotionally drained but feeling like we'd taken a real step toward justice. But the hardest conversation was still ahead of us. Connor had to tell his parents what Drew had done. We decided to do it together, the three of us. Connor, Ivy, and me. We drove out to the Walsh Ranch on a Saturday morning, unannounced, because we couldn't risk Drew being warned. Patrick and Catherine were surprised to see us, especially Ivy. Connor? What's going on? Catherine asked. You all look so serious. We need to talk, Connor said. About Drew. Patrick's expression hardened. What's he done now? Maybe we should sit down, I suggested. We went into their formal living room, the same room where I'd celebrated my engagement to Connor, where we'd planned our wedding, where I'd announced my pregnancy. Now I was going to destroy this family. Connor took the lead. He explained the DNA test, the assault, the second pregnancy, Drew's confession. He laid it all out with clinical precision, his voice steady even as his parents' faces went from confusion to horror. Catherine started crying halfway through. No, that's not possible. Drew wouldn't, he couldn't. He admitted it, Mom, Connor said. We have proof. Patrick sat in silence, his face like stone. When Connor finished, he asked only one question. Where is he? We don't know, I said. He's been trying to contact us, but we haven't responded. Patrick pulled out his phone and called Drew. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Come to the house.
Now.
Don't make me come find you. He hung up. We waited in tense silence. Catherine cried quietly into her hands. Patrick stared at nothing, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. 20 minutes later, Drew's truck pulled up outside. He walked in looking defensive, probably expecting another lecture about his lifestyle or his finances. When he saw all of us sitting there, his face went pale. What's going on? He asked, his eyes darting between us. Sit down, Patrick said. Dad, I don't.
Seat.
Down. Drew sat. Patrick leaned forward, his voice deadly calm. Did you rape your brother's wife and her sister? Drew's mouth opened and closed. That's not. It wasn't like that. Did you drug them and have sex with them without their consent? I didn't. We were all drinking. Answer the question. Drew flinched. I put something in their drinks, yes. But it wasn't to hurt them, it was just to help them relax. Connor moved so fast, I barely saw it. He grabbed Drew by the shirt and slammed him against the wall. You raped them? Connor shouted, his voice breaking. You drugged and raped my wife and my sister-in-law, and you got them both pregnant. Say it. Admit what you did. Patrick pulled Connor back. Let him go. Connor released Drew, but didn't step away. She was my wife, you fucking monster. How could you? Drew was crying now.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I didn't think. I thought I was being careful. Careful. Ivy's voice was like ice. You thought you were being careful? What about the other times? How many women have you done this to? Drew's eyes widened, confirming what we'd suspected. How many, Drew? Patrick's voice was quiet but terrible. Drew slumped against the wall, defeated. I don't know. I don't. Maybe 5? 6? I wasn't keeping track. Catherine's sobs filled the room. Get out, Patrick said. Get out of this house and don't come back. Dad, please. You're no son of mine. You're a rapist. You're going to prison, if there's any justice in this world. And you will never, ever set foot on this property again. Mom. Drew turned to Catherine desperately. She couldn't even look at him. Please, I can make this right. You can't, I said, finding my voice. There's no making this right. You violated us. You got us pregnant. And now we have to live with that for the rest of our lives. Drew looked at me, tears streaming down his face.
Elise, I'm sorry.
Don't say my name. Don't ever say my name again. Patrick grabbed Drew by the arm and physically escorted him out of the house. We heard them arguing outside, Patrick's voice rising to a shout, then Drew's truck starting and driving away. When Patrick came back inside, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. I'm sorry, he said to me and Ivy. I'm so deeply sorry for what my son did to you. If there's anything at all, we can do to help, please tell us. Support the criminal case, Connor said. Help us gather evidence. Make sure he faces consequences. We will, Catherine said through her tears. Whatever you need, he deserves to pay for what he's done. We left the ranch an hour later, all of us emotionally destroyed but united in purpose. Drew Walsh was going to face justice, and we were going to make sure everyone knew exactly what he'd done. The investigation moved faster than we'd expected. 3 days after we filed the police report, Detective Gonzalez called with an update. We've located security footage from the Walsh Ranch, she said. Your father-in-law was cooperative. We found something you need to see. Connor and I went to the police station that afternoon. Ivy met us there, along with Lisa Hernandez. Detective Gonzalez set up a laptop in the interview room and pulled up the footage. It was time-stamped March 15th, the night of Patrick's birthday party. This is from the pool house camera, she said. Watch the time-stamp around 10:47 p.m. The video showed the pool area, lit with party lights. I saw myself talking to Drew by the bar, both of us holding drinks. I looked relaxed, laughing at something he'd said. Then Drew turned away slightly, his body blocking the camera's view of my glass. His hand moved, brief, subtle, practiced. When he turned back, he handed me the drink. He put something in it. I whispered. Keep watching, Detective Gonzalez said. 5 minutes later, I saw myself swaying slightly. Drew put his arm around me, supporting me, leading me toward the main house. To anyone watching, it would have looked like a concerned friend helping someone who'd had too much to drink. The camera lost us at that point, but another one picked us up near the guest wing. Drew was practically carrying me now, my head lolling against his shoulder. That's not what someone who's just drunk looks like, Connor said, his voice tight. That's what someone who's been drugged looks like. The video continued. 15 minutes later, different camera, different angle. Drew leading Ivy toward the same guest wing, her stumbling, him supporting her weight. He did it twice, Ivy said, her voice shaking. Same night, same method, like a fucking assembly line. This is strong evidence, Lisa said. It shows premeditation, shows him administering something to their drinks, shows them incapacitated. Combined with the DNA evidence and the pregnancies, this makes the case much stronger. What happens now? I asked. We take this to the DA, Detective Gonzalez said. With this footage, the DNA evidence, the pattern of behavior, and the confession to his parents, we have enough to recommend charges. Will they arrest him? Connor asked. That's up to the DA. But yes, I believe they will. 2 days later, Drew Walsh was arrested and charged with 2 counts of sexual assault. The news hit Austin like a bomb. Drew's arrest made the local papers immediately. Prominent Austin family member charged with sexual assault, the headline read. They didn't name us as victims, Our identities were protected, but everyone in the medical and social circles knew who Connor was married to knew about Ivy. The speculation was immediate and vicious. My phone started ringing with calls from colleagues, friends, acquaintances. Most were supportive, but some were probing, fishing for details, feeding the gossip machine. I stopped answering calls from anyone outside my immediate circle. Connor's hospital colleagues were more direct. Several doctors approached him with variations on the same sentiment. We heard about Drew. If you need anything, let us know. But there were others who looked at him differently now, like his brother's crimes somehow reflected on him. Connor came home one evening looking defeated. They're talking about it at the hospital, he said. Not openly, but I can see it. The whispers stop when I walk by. People are wondering if I knew, if I helped cover it up, if our whole family is corrupt. That's not fair. I know. But that's how these things work. Guilt by association. The worst part was the pregnancy. Both Ivy and I were showing now, our bodies betraying us by displaying the evidence of what Drew had done. Every time someone congratulated me on the baby, I had to smile and thank them while screaming inside. We'd both decided, after long conversations and countless tears, to continue our pregnancies. It wasn't an easy choice. Part of me wanted to terminate, to erase every trace of Drew from my body. But another part, the part that understood genetics and biology and the innocence of the unborn, knew that this baby was half mine. Half my DNA, growing in my body, innocent of its father's crimes. Ivy felt the same way. I can't punish the baby for what he did, she'd said. But I also can't pretend this is how I wanted to become a mother. We were both in therapy now, processing the assault, the pregnancies, the future. My therapist specialized in sexual assault survivors, helping me understand that my choice to continue the pregnancy didn't mean I'd forgiven Drew or accepted what happened. You're allowed to love your baby and hate how it was conceived, she told me. Those feelings can coexist. Connor was extraordinary through all of it. He came to every doctor's appointment, held my hand during ultrasounds, talked to my belly like the baby was his. He never once made me feel like this pregnancy was a burden or a reminder of his brother's betrayal. This is our baby, he'd say. Not genetically mine, but ours. We'll raise it together. Love it together. Drew doesn't get to take that from us. I loved him more than I'd thought possible. 3 weeks after Drew's arrest, Detective Gonzalez called again. We found other victims, she said. 3 women have come forward, all with similar stories, parties, memory gaps. Waking up knowing something had happened but not remembering consent. None of them reported it at the time because they blamed themselves, thought they'd been too drunk, were afraid of not being believed. My stomach turned. How did you find them? After the arrest became public, we set up a hotline. These 3 called within days of each other. And we're investigating 2 more potential cases where women showed up at hospitals with suspected sexual assault but never named their attacker. 5 total. Ivy asked. She was with me when the call came through. At minimum. Drew admitted to you that there were 5 or 6 others beyond you too. We may be looking at 7 or 8 victims total. The number was staggering. 7 or 8 women, maybe more, all violated by the same predator over the course of years. Will they testify? I asked. 2 have agreed to give statements. The 3rd is still deciding. The other potential victims are harder. We need to track them down, see if they're willing to come forward. But even with what we have now, the pattern is clear. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was predatory behavior over an extended period. The DA's office moved to add additional charges. Drew was now facing 4 counts of sexual assault, with a possibility of more as the investigation continued. His bail was set at $500,000. Patrick Walsh paid it immediately, but with conditions. Drew had to surrender his passport, wear an ankle monitor, and stay at least 500 feet away from all identified victims. That meant he couldn't go anywhere near Connor and me, couldn't attend any Walsh family events where we'd be present. He was effectively exiled from his own family. Catherine called me a week after the bail was posted. Elise, I need you to know something, she said, her voice heavy. Patrick and I have cut Drew off financially. No more money, no more support, nothing. His legal fees are coming from a trust his grandmother left him, but beyond that, he's on his own. Thank you for telling me. We also want to do something for you and Ivy. We know this has been traumatic, that you're both dealing with pregnancies you didn't plan. Patrick and I would like to set up trust funds for both babies. Not as payment or apology, nothing could make up for what Drew did, but because these children are innocent and they deserve to have financial security. I didn't know what to say. Catherine, that's incredibly generous, but please, let us do this. We failed to protect you from our son. The least we can do is make sure his children are cared for. I talked to Connor about it that night. He thought we should accept. My parents are good people who raised a monster, he said. They're trying to do right by you and by the babies. Let them. So I agreed, and Ivy did too. Within a week, substantial trust funds had been established for both children, ensuring their education and futures would be secure regardless of what happened to Drew. It was a strange kind of grace, benefiting financially from the man who'd assaulted us while simultaneously working to put him in prison. A month after the arrest, the Austin American-Statesman ran a major investigative piece. Serial sexual predator in Austin's elite, how Drew Walsh targeted multiple women over years. The headline read, the article detailed the investigation, the pattern of assault, the security footage, the multiple victims. It didn't name us, but it included quotes from Detective Gonzalez, from Lisa Hernandez, from prosecutors building the case. It mentioned that 2 of the victims were pregnant as a result of the assaults. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The story went viral on social media. People started sharing their own stories of assault, of not being believed, of predators who used money and status to avoid consequences. Drew Walsh became a symbol of everything wrong with how society handles sexual assault. And I became an anonymous voice for survivors. The fertility clinic where I worked was supportive, but the attention was intense. Reporters tried to get comments from my colleagues, from patients, from anyone connected to the case. My supervisor put out a statement saying the clinic stood behind its staff and supported survivors of sexual assault, but would not comment on specific cases. Some of my clients knew it was me. The timeline of my pregnancy, the public knowledge of Connor's brother, the pieces weren't hard to put together. Most were compassionate, sharing their own stories of assault and survival. But a few weren't. A few switched to other genetic counselors, uncomfortable with the idea that I was involved in such drama. One woman even complained to my supervisor that having me counsel her on her pregnancy was triggering, given what had happened to me. I tried not to let it hurt, but it did. 2 months after the arrest, I was 5 months pregnant and starting to show significantly. I was at the grocery store, trying to remain anonymous in Austin's crowded Central Market, when a woman approached me. You're Elise Walsh, aren't you? She said. Connor's wife. I tensed. Yes.
I'm Natalie Porter.
I was one of the other victims. I wanted to thank you. I looked at her more carefully. She was maybe 30, professionally dressed, holding a basket of produce like this was a normal shopping trip and not an encounter with someone who shared your traumatic experience. Thank you for what? I asked carefully. For reporting it, for pursuing charges, for making it possible for the rest of us to come forward. Her eyes were wet. What he did to me happened 3 years ago. I never told anyone because I thought no one would believe me. He was charming, from a good family, and I was just some woman at a party who'd had too much to drink. But when you and your sister came forward, when the security footage proved he was drugging women, it gave me permission to stop blaming myself. I felt tears pricking my own eyes. I'm sorry he hurt you. I'm sorry he hurt you too. And I'm sorry you're dealing with. She gestured to my belly. That must be incredibly difficult. It is. But I'm trying to separate the baby from how it was conceived. That's brave. I don't know if I could do that. We talked for a few more minutes, sharing the strange intimacy of survivors. When we parted, she hugged me and whispered, "We're going to make sure he pays for what he did to all of us." I went home and cried for an hour, overwhelmed by the weight of what we were carrying, not just the pregnancies, but the responsibility of representing all Drew's victims. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for early December, 3 months after the arrest. Lisa Hernandez prepared us extensively. This isn't the trial, she explained. This is where the prosecution presents enough evidence to establish probable cause. The defense will try to poke holes in the case, but they can't present their full defense yet. It's basically a preview of what's to come. Will we have to testify? Ivy asked.
Yes.
Both of you. You'll be the primary witnesses. The other victims will also testify about the pattern of behavior. Will Drew be there?
Yes.
He has the right to face his accusers. The thought of seeing him again, of being in the same room, made me physically ill. The hearing took place in a Travis County courtroom on a cold December morning. Ivy and I arrived together, Connor and Lisa with us. The courtroom was packed, media, victims' advocates, members of the Austin community who'd followed the case. And in the front, separated from us by what felt like an ocean but was actually just 20 feet, sat Drew. He looked terrible, thinner, older, hunted. He didn't look at us when we entered. The prosecution went first, presenting the security footage, the DNA evidence, the testimonies from multiple victims. Detective Gonzalez testified about the investigation, about the pattern of behavior, about Drew's admission to his parents. Then it was my turn to testify. I walked to the witness stand, my hand on my pregnant belly, and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Jennifer Martinez, walked me through that night. What I remembered, what I didn't, waking up with no memory of consent. And when you learned you were pregnant, what did you discover? She asked. That the baby wasn't my husband's. That it was Drew Walsh's. That my sister was also pregnant with his child from the same night. How did that make you feel? Violated.
Betrayed.
Horrified. I looked directly at Drew for the first time, and determined to make sure he faced consequences for what he did. Drew's attorney objected several times, trying to suppress the emotional testimony, but the judge allowed it. Ivy testified next, her story echoing mine. Then Natalie, then another woman named Sarah, then a third named Michelle. 4 women, all with variations on the same nightmare, all pointing to the same predator. Drew's attorney tried to argue that the encounters were consensual, that the memory gaps were due to alcohol, not drugs, that the pregnancies were unfortunate, but not evidence of assault. The judge wasn't buying it. Based on the evidence presented, she said at the end of the hearing, I find probable cause to believe that the defendant, Drew Walsh, committed the crimes of which he's accused. This case will proceed to trial. Drew's face crumpled. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Lisa had prepared a brief statement. Justice is being served. Multiple women have come forward with credible allegations against Drew Walsh, and the evidence supports those allegations. We're grateful for the justice system's response and look forward to the trial. I didn't speak to the media. I just held Connor's hand and walked to our car, trying to process what had just happened. We'd cleared the first hurdle. Drew Walsh was going to trial. That evening, Catherine called. I watched the hearing, she said, her voice breaking. I sat in that courtroom and listened to what my son did to you, to your sister, to those other women. And Elise, I'm so deeply ashamed. Catherine, this isn't your fault. I raised him. Somewhere along the way, I failed to teach him basic human decency, basic respect for women. I failed as a mother.
No.
Drew made his own choices. You didn't make them for him. She was crying now. I keep asking myself how I didn't see it. How many warning signs did I miss? Were there others before these women? Did I excuse behavior I shouldn't have? I didn't have answers for her. I didn't know how Drew became what he was. Nature, nurture, some combination of both. All I knew was that he'd hurt people, and now he had to face the consequences. Focus on making it right now, I told her. Support the victims. Support the case. That's what you can do. After the hearing, something shifted in Austin's social landscape. The Walshes had been pillars of the community, charity boards, country clubs, political connections. But Drew's case had tarnished that reputation. Some people stood by Patrick and Catherine, recognizing that they weren't responsible for their son's crimes. Others distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the family. Connor felt it most acutely at the hospital. Some colleagues were supportive, but others avoided him, not knowing how to interact with someone whose brother was an alleged serial rapist. They look at me and wonder if I'm like him, Connor said one night. If there's something in the Walsh DNA that makes us predators. You're nothing like him. I know. But they don't. And I can't blame them for wondering. It was destroying him slowly, watching his family's name become synonymous with sexual assault, watching his career be impacted by his brother's crimes. 2 weeks before Christmas, Ivy called me in tears. He contacted me, she said.
Drew.
He sent a letter to my apartment. What? He's not supposed to have any contact with you. That violates the protective order. I know. I called Detective Gonzalez. They're going after him for the violation. But Elise, you need to read what he wrote. She forwarded me a photo of the letter. Drew's handwriting, messy and desperate. Ivy, I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I need you to understand something. I never meant to hurt anyone. What happened that night was a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I'm so sorry. I know you're pregnant with my child. I want to be involved, to be a father, to make this right. Please drop the charges. Please give me a chance to prove I can be better. I'll do therapy, I'll change, I'll be whoever you need me to be. Please. I'm begging you. Don't destroy my life over one mistake. I read it twice, my hands shaking with rage. One mistake, I said to Ivy. He calls drugging and raping 8 women one mistake. He doesn't even understand what he did wrong. Or he's trying to manipulate you into dropping charges. It won't work. I'm not dropping anything. I forwarded this to Lisa and Detective Gonzalez. They said it's evidence of witness intimidation. Drew's bail was revoked. He went back to jail pending trial. That was his own doing, violating the protective order, contacting a victim, attempting to influence testimony. He'd sabotaged his own defense. As Christmas approached, I was 6 months pregnant and emotionally exhausted. The trial was scheduled for February, 2 months away. 2 months of preparation, of reliving the assault, of carrying this baby that reminded me daily of what Drew had done. Connor surprised me with a trip to his family's ranch, not the main house where the party had been, but a small cabin on the property that overlooked the hill country. I asked my parents if we could use it for a week, he said. Get away from Austin, from the case, from everything. Just us. We spent a week in that cabin, disconnected from the world. We hiked, cooked together, talked about everything except Drew and the trial and the assault. On our last night there, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Connor put his hand on my belly and felt the baby kick. It moved, he said, wonder in his voice.
Yeah.
It's been moving a lot lately. Can I talk to it? I smiled. Of course. He leaned down to my belly and spoke softly. Hey, little one.
I'm Connor.
I'm going to be your dad. Not biologically, but in every way that matters. And I want you to know that you're loved, that you're wanted, and that none of what happened before you existed is your fault. You're innocent. You're ours. And we can't wait to meet you. I cried, because this was what grace looked like. This was what love looked like. This was Connor choosing to be a father to a child that wasn't his, loving me and this baby despite everything. We went back to Austin after that week, ready to face whatever came next. The trial was approaching. Drew's future hung in the balance, and we were going to make sure justice was served. The trial began on February 14th, Valentine's Day of all days. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I was 8 months pregnant by then, visibly carrying the evidence of Drew's crimes. Ivy was the same. Both of us waddling into the Travis County Courthouse like living, breathing proof that sexual assault has consequences that last far beyond the moment of violation. The media attention was intense. National news outlets had picked up the story. Serial predator trial begins in Austin. Multiple women to testify against accused rapist. Pregnant victims confront alleged attacker in court. Connor had taken a leave of absence from the hospital to be with me through the trial. His colleagues understood, and those who didn't weren't worth worrying about anymore. Lisa Hernandez had prepared us extensively. This will be hard, she'd warned. Defense attorneys will try to discredit you, make you seem unreliable, suggest you're lying or misremembering. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and remember that the evidence speaks for itself. The prosecution's case was strong. They had the security footage showing Drew drugging our drinks. They had the DNA evidence proving he'd fathered both our babies. They had testimony from 4 other women with nearly identical stories. They had his confession to his parents, his violation of the protective order, his pattern of predatory behavior. Drew's defense attorney, a slick lawyer named Robert Chin, tried to argue that the encounters were consensual, that we'd all been willing participants who regretted it later. He suggested the memory gaps were due to alcohol, not drugs. He pointed out that no toxicology tests had been done at the time, that there was no physical proof of drugging beyond our word and the video. But the video was damning. The jury watched it multiple times, Drew's hand moving to our drinks, the practiced way he did it, the fact that he did it to both of us the same night. The prosecution's expert toxicologist testified that the movements on camera were consistent with someone surreptitiously adding substances to drinks, and that the victims' described symptoms matched common date rape drugs. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I testified on day 3. Heavily pregnant, walking to the witness stand was physically difficult and emotionally excruciating. Drew sat at the defense table, looking small and defeated, refusing to make eye contact. The prosecutor, Jennifer Martinez, walked me through my testimony with care and precision. What I remembered from that night, what I didn't. Waking up with no memory of consent, the DNA test that revealed the truth. How did you feel when you discovered the baby you were carrying wasn't your husband's but his brother's? Jennifer asked. Violated, I said, my voice steady despite the tears. Betrayed. And horrified that I'd been assaulted in a way that left a permanent consequence. Are you keeping the baby?
Yes.
This baby is innocent of how it was conceived. It's half mine, and I'm choosing to love it despite everything. That must be incredibly difficult. It is. But my husband has been extraordinary. He's choosing to be this baby's father, to raise it as his own, to give it a life full of love despite its biological origins. I looked at Connor in the gallery. He was crying quietly, his hand over his heart. Defense attorney Chen tried to shake my testimony on cross-examination. Ms. Brennan, you said you don't remember consenting to sex with my client. But you also said you'd been drinking. Isn't it possible you simply don't remember because you were intoxicated? The video shows Drew putting something in my drink. The video shows him near your drink. It doesn't definitively show him adding anything to it. The toxicology expert testified that his movements were consistent with drugging behavior. But there's no actual proof, is there? No toxicology report from that night showing drugs in your system. Because I didn't know I'd been drugged. I thought I was just drunk. It wasn't until months later, when the DNA test came back, that I understood what had really happened. Isn't it convenient that you have no physical proof? Objection. Jennifer stood. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Chen, move on. He tried a different approach. You work as a genetic counselor, correct? Yes. So, you're an expert in reading DNA tests. It's part of my job, yes. Isn't it possible that when you saw the paternity results, you panicked because you'd cheated on your husband, and you concocted this story about being drugged to cover your infidelity? I felt rage flare in my chest, but I kept my voice level.
No.
I did not cheat on my husband. I was assaulted. And the fact that my sister has an identical story from the same night, that there are multiple other women with similar experiences, that the security footage exists, all of that proves this wasn't about infidelity. It was about a predator targeting vulnerable women. No further questions, Chen said, clearly realizing he wasn't going to break me. Ivy testified next, her story mirroring mine. Then Natalie Porter, then Sarah Jenkins, then Michelle Ross, then 2 other women who'd come forward late in the investigation. 6 victims total, all with variations on the same nightmare. The defense couldn't explain away 6 women. They couldn't explain the security footage. They couldn't explain Drew's confession to his parents or his violation of the protective order. On day 10 of the trial, Drew's attorney made a last-ditch effort to introduce character witnesses, people who'd known Drew as charming, generous, incapable of such violence. But the prosecution countered with witnesses who'd seen his darker side. Former girlfriends who testified about his controlling behavior, his inability to accept rejection, his sense of entitlement. Bartenders from clubs who remembered him being handsy with women who seemed too intoxicated to consent. The pattern was undeniable. On day 12, both sides gave closing arguments. Jennifer Martinez stood before the jury and said, Drew Walsh is a serial sexual predator who used his family status, his personal charm, and chemical substances to assault at least 6 women over several years. The evidence is overwhelming. The video footage, the DNA results, the testimonies from multiple victims, all of it points to one inescapable conclusion. Drew Walsh is guilty of sexual assault. Your job is to hold him accountable. Defense attorney Chen argued that the case was built on circumstantial evidence and regretful women trying to explain away consensual encounters. But even he seemed to know it was hopeless. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they came back, Connor held my hand so tight, I thought my bones might break. On the charge of sexual assault in the first degree, count 1, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On count 2, guilty. On count 3, guilty. All 4 counts. Guilty on all charges. Drew's face crumpled. His attorney put a hand on his shoulder. Catherine Walsh, sitting in the gallery with Patrick, began to sob. I felt Connor's arms around me, felt Ivy's hand in mine, felt the weight of 2 years of pain and fear and violation finally begin to lift. We did it, Ivy whispered. We actually did it. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, giving the judge time to review victim impact statements and sentencing recommendations. All 6 victims submitted statements. Mine was 5 pages long, detailing not just the assault but the pregnancy, the decision to continue it, the complexity of loving a baby while hating how it was conceived, the toll on my marriage and career and mental health. Connor also submitted a statement as an impacted family member, describing the betrayal by his brother, the destruction of their family, the ongoing struggle to separate Drew's crimes from his own identity. The prosecution recommended the maximum sentence, 20 years per count, to run consecutively. 80 years total. The defense pleaded for leniency, concurrent sentences, recognition that Drew was himself damaged and in need of treatment rather than punishment. On sentencing day, I was 9 months pregnant and due any day. My doctor had cleared me to attend but warned that stress could trigger labor. I didn't care. I needed to see this through. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Margaret Flynn, reviewed the case thoroughly before speaking. Mr. Walsh, you have been convicted of 4 counts of sexual assault. The evidence against you was overwhelming. You systematically targeted vulnerable women, drugged them, assaulted them, and then tried to silence them through intimidation and manipulation. Drew stood, his lawyer beside him, looking like a shell of the charming man he'd once been. The harm you've caused is immeasurable, Judge Flynn continued. 2 women are carrying pregnancies resulting from your assaults. Others have suffered psychological trauma that will last for years. You've destroyed your family's reputation, your brother's peace of mind, and the trust of an entire community. She paused, looking directly at him. I've read all 6 victim impact statements. I've heard testimony about the pattern of your behavior, and I've considered the defense's arguments for leniency. My heart was racing. I find those arguments unconvincing. The evidence shows you knew exactly what you were doing. You planned these assaults. You executed them with practice and precision. And you showed no remorse until you were caught. Therefore, I sentence you to 20 years on count 1, 20 years on count 2, 20 years on count 3, and 20 years on count 4. These sentences will run consecutively for a total of 80 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. The courtroom erupted. Drew's attorney immediately began discussing appeals. Catherine Walsh's sobs echoed off the walls. Media members rushed out to report the verdict. 80 years. Drew Walsh would be over 100 years old before he was eligible for release. He was led away in handcuffs, and I watched him go with a feeling I can only describe as closure. Not satisfaction, not joy, just the quiet certainty that justice had been done. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. This time, I was ready to speak. I want to thank the Austin Police Department, the Travis County District Attorney's Office, and especially Detective Maria Gonzalez and Prosecutor Jennifer Martinez for believing survivors and building a case that held a predator accountable, I said, reading from a prepared statement. This verdict sends a message that sexual assault has consequences, that survivors will be believed, and that wealth and status don't put anyone above the law. What about the pregnancy? A reporter called out. How do you feel about carrying your rapist's child? Connor stepped forward. That baby is my child. Not biologically, but in every way that matters. We're raising it together, with love, and Drew Walsh has no place in its life. I squeezed his hand, grateful beyond words. We drove home from the courthouse, exhausted and relieved, and that night, my water broke. 12 hours later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. We named her Grace. Grace Elise Walsh. Connor cut the umbilical cord with tears streaming down his face. He held her first, this baby who wasn't his biologically but was his in every other way, and whispered, "Welcome to the world, sweetheart. Your dad loves you so much." I cried watching this man who'd been betrayed by his brother, whose family had been destroyed, whose life had been upended, choosing love anyway. Grace had my eyes and nose, but other features that reminded me Drew existed. I'd prepared myself for this, worked through it in therapy, accepted that she would be a daily reminder of trauma. But when I looked at her, I didn't see Drew. I saw possibility. I saw innocence. I saw my daughter. 3 weeks after Grace was born, Ivy gave birth to a son. She named him River, and she was raising him alone by choice, with support from our parents and financial help from the trust fund Catherine and Patrick had established. Our babies were half-siblings, both products of assault, both deeply loved despite their origins. The 6 months after the trial were about healing. I took maternity leave from the fertility clinic, spending my days with Grace, learning to be a mother, processing everything that had happened. Connor bonded with Grace immediately, doing midnight feedings and diaper changes and endless hours of skin-to-skin contact. "She's my daughter," he'd say when people asked how he could raise his brother's child. "Drew contributed DNA. I'm her father. There's a difference." The Austin community rallied around us. The fertility clinic held a fundraiser for sexual assault survivor resources. The Austin Women's Coalition invited me to speak about my experience. Other survivors reached out, sharing their stories, finding hope in the fact that the system had worked for us. Drew's appeals were denied. He was serving his 80-year sentence at a maximum security prison in East Texas. I thought about him sometimes, the man who destroyed so many lives, including his own, and I felt mostly pity. He'd thrown away everything for a few hours of power over vulnerable women, and now he'd spend the rest of his life in a cage. Catherine and Patrick remained supportive, visiting regularly, doting on Grace, trying to make amends for their son's crimes. They'd set up a foundation in honor of the victims, funding sexual assault prevention programs and survivor support services. "We can't undo what Drew did," Patrick told me once, holding Grace in his arms. "But we can try to prevent others from experiencing what you went through." 1 year after the trial, I returned to work at the fertility clinic. My first client was a woman who'd been raped and was pregnant as a result. She was trying to decide whether to continue the pregnancy or terminate it, and she was terrified either way. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, crying in my office. "I don't know if I can carry this baby, love this baby, knowing how it was created." I told her about Grace, about the complexity of loving a child while hating the circumstances of conception, about Connor's Grace and my therapy and the daily choice to see my daughter as separate from her biological father. "There's no right answer," I told her. "Whatever you choose, termination or continuation, it's valid. But if you choose to continue, know that it's possible to love the baby while hating what was done to you. It's hard, but it's possible." She ended up continuing her pregnancy, and I counseled her through it. When her baby was born, she called me from the hospital. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, "for showing me it was possible to get through this, for being proof that survivors can heal and love and build good lives despite what was done to us." That conversation reminded me why I'd fought so hard for justice, why I'd testified despite the pain, why I'd chosen to speak publicly about my experience. Not just for myself, but for every survivor who needed to know that healing was possible and that predators could be held accountable. 2 years after the trial, Connor and I sat on our back porch watching Grace play in the yard. She was a bright, curious toddler, full of energy and joy, showing no signs of the trauma that surrounded her conception. "Do you ever regret it?" Connor asked, choosing to have her. I thought about it carefully. I regret what Drew did. I regret the assault, the violation, the pain of those first months when I didn't know if I could love a baby conceived that way. But Grace herself?
No.
I don't regret her for a second. "She's amazing," Connor said, watching her chase butterflies. "And she has no idea how much courage it took for you to give her life. We'll tell her someday, when she's old enough to understand. We'll tell her about the assault, about the trial, about your choice to be her father despite everything. We'll tell her the truth." "How will you explain Drew?" "The same way we explain any painful truth, with love and context and the understanding that she's not responsible for his crimes. She's innocent. She's ours. And she's loved. Connor pulled me close. You're an incredible mother. And an incredible person. I'm in awe of your strength. I couldn't have done this without you. You could have. You're the strongest person I know. But I'm grateful I got to be here for it. We sat there as the sun set over Austin, watching our daughter play, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The trial was over. Drew was in prison. Grace was thriving. Connor and I had survived the worst thing that could happen to a marriage and come out stronger. Ivy was thriving too, her photography career taking off, River growing into a happy toddler who loved his cousin Grace. Our parents visited often, supporting both of us, helping with childcare, marveling at how we'd turned trauma into love. 3 years after the trial, I was invited to testify before the Texas State Legislature about sexual assault laws and survivor support. I stood in front of lawmakers and told my story, the assault, the pregnancy, the trial, the conviction. I talked about the barriers survivors face, the reasons many don't report, the need for better resources and stronger laws. Drew Walsh is in prison because I had resources many survivors don't have, I said. I had security camera footage, DNA evidence, multiple other victims who came forward, a supportive spouse, financial means to pursue justice. But what about survivors who don't have those advantages? What about those who are assaulted by people who are more careful, who leave no evidence, who target women with no resources to fight back? I advocated for longer statutes of limitations, better funding for sexual assault nurse examiners, mandatory toxicology testing when assault is suspected, stronger penalties for repeat offenders. The legislature passed several of the measures I recommended. It wasn't everything, but it was progress. 5 years after the trial, Grace started kindergarten. She was bright, social, loved by her teachers and classmates. She called Connor Daddy and had no idea he wasn't biologically her father. We'd tell her the truth eventually, but for now, she was just a happy little girl with parents who loved her. The Austin American-Statesman did a follow-up feature on the Walsh case. 5 years later, where are they now? They interviewed me, Connor, Ivy, and 2 of the other survivors. The article talked about the long-term impact of sexual assault, the ongoing healing process, the ways we'd all rebuilt our lives. Drew Walsh took something from us. I was quoted as saying, but he didn't take everything. We survived. We healed. We built beautiful lives despite what he did. That's our victory, not just his conviction, but our continued thriving. The article ended with an update on Drew. Still in prison, still fighting appeals, still facing the consequences of his actions. I didn't think about him often anymore. He'd become a footnote in our family story, the predator who'd been caught and punished, the man whose crimes had inadvertently given us grace. 10 years after the trial, Connor and I renewed our vows in a small ceremony on the Walsh Ranch. Not the main house where the assault had happened, but the cabin where we'd healed, where he'd first bonded with Grace before she was born. Grace was 10 years old, serving as our flower girl. River was there too, Ivy's bright, artistic son who looked nothing like Drew and everything like her. Catherine and Patrick stood with us, these people who'd lost a son to his own evil choices but had gained the love and respect of the survivors by choosing the right side. During the ceremony, I spoke directly to Connor. 10 years ago, our marriage was tested by the worst betrayal imaginable. Your brother assaulted me, left me pregnant, destroyed the life we'd planned. You could have walked away. No one would have blamed you. But you didn't. You chose love. You chose to be Grace's father. You chose to stand beside me through the trial, the healing, the rebuilding. You chose us, every single day, even when it was hard. Connor was crying. I'd choose you 1,000 times over. You and Grace are my family, my life, my everything. We kissed as the sun set over the hill country, and I felt the completion of a journey that had started with violation and ended with love. After the ceremony, Grace asked me why we were renewing our vows. Because sometimes life tests you, I told her. And when you come through those tests together, you want to celebrate the strength of your commitment. What tested you and Dad? She was still too young to know the full story, but old enough to understand basics. Something hard happened to me before you were born, I said carefully. And Dad was incredibly brave and loving through it. These vows are celebrating that strength. Was it about me? She asked, her eyes worried. You are the best thing that ever happened to us, I said firmly. Never doubt that. She hugged me, and I held my daughter, this child of trauma who'd become a child of love, and felt nothing but gratitude for the choice to keep her, to love her, to build a life that honored both the pain of the past and the hope of the future. That night, after the celebration ended, Connor and I stood on the cabin porch where he'd first spoken to Grace in utero, where he'd claimed her as his. Do you remember what you said to her? I asked. That last night before we went back to Austin for the trial? I remember. I told her she was loved, that she was wanted, that none of what happened was her fault. You were right, on all counts. She's extraordinary, Elise. And so are you. I leaned into him, watching the stars come out over the Texas sky, and thought about everything we'd survived. The assault, the pregnancy, the trial, the healing. A decade of choosing love over bitterness, hope over despair, justice over silence. Drew Walsh had tried to destroy me, but instead, he'd inadvertently given me grace and shown me exactly how strong I could be. That was my victory. Not just his conviction, though that mattered. My victory was this life I'd built, this family, this career helping other survivors, this daughter who thrived despite her origins, this marriage that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. Drew was in prison, would likely die there, his life reduced to a cell and regrets. I was free, surrounded by love, building a future that honored both the pain and the triumph. And that made all the difference. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, leave a comment about where you're watching from, and subscribe with notifications on. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual assault, please know that healing is possible, that justice is worth fighting for, and that you are not defined by what was done to you. You are stronger than you know. Choose yourself. Choose healing. Choose to build a life that honors your survival. And remember, predators can be held accountable, survivors can thrive, and love, real, chosen, daily love, can transform even the darkest situations into something beautiful.